I guess it was a problem with this microphone. So let's not say it's big for nothing. We'll just keep it aside and use a regular old um, headphones. So you're welcome to today's live stream. And basically, what I wanted to do today is to take a last and show you all of the important parts of the last because we are going to be creating patterns. And the patterns that we are creating, we're going to be creating on a shoe last. So it's important for you, if you're going to create something on this last, it is always important for you to know the most important parts of this last and why it is important to use them when you're creating the last. Now, many of you are already subscribers to my channel. If you're not, make sure you are a subscriber. And many of you have already watched the videos that I talked about, the videos that are in the playlist. If you have not seen those videos are extremely, extremely helpful. So if you've not seen those videos, I recommend that you actually go and see them. However, this class is a live demonstration of some of the things that we've discussed in those videos and why, if there are any things that we missed, then you can ask those questions and I can get a feedback from you. In any case, anybody who wants to come on live and show on this live stream with me so that you can ask questions, I can hear you audibly rather than just using the chat box. If where you are is okay, just let me know in the WhatsApp group and I'll send you a link with which you can join me here. That way, you can ask your questions live. I can hear you and I can respond to you, and it will be like we're just having a video call. But in any case, we'll use the chat boxes. So anything that you don't understand, just put them in the chat box. I can see the chat box and we will do that. Now, I'm going to share a slide that I'm going to use in talking through what we are going to be discussing today. So just give me a minute. Let me load up that slide. My audio is still good, right? If my audio is still good, please do let me know in the chat box. I see that we have 6 people participating live. That's excellent. That's very good. There's also another class scheduled for 10 o'clock. So when the people who are in the 10 o'clock band show up, then we can also have them. So fundamentals of footwear patterns. And I have said that what I really want to do with this class is to show you some very, very important parts of a shoe last that you need to be aware of when you're creating patterns for shoe last. So my name is Victor Nyebado. I'm a lawyer by training. I taught myself how to make shoes some 6 years ago. Being a lawyer, I have a knack for reading a lot. So I have actually read quite a bit about some of the things that we are discussing. Not to say in any way that I'm the end all be all or that I'm even an expert in this field, but I have read quite a number of the things that the experts have said. And I have, in the course of time, developed my own methods, which have consistently worked for me. And it is those methods that I want to put across to you. So some of the things that I will be saying, you will not find in any shoemaking textbook, like things like the rule of quarters, for instance, you will not find in any shoemaking textbook. Those are things that I have used myself, and I find that they work. I've taught them to quite a number of other people who have also testified that it works out for them. So take whatever I said with, a reasonable amount of certainty, but also a reasonable amount of salt. Right. So this is a rundown of what we are going to do. Before we go into discussing last anatomy, we will first of all talk about how, if you are going to make shoes for someone, you will take a measurement of their feet, why you are taking certain measurements, and what those measurements mean. Sometimes you make shoes for people and you deliver it to them. The shoes look very beautiful, but they don't fit. So that's a problem. You can make very good shoes, but shoes that don't fit, you have a problem. You can make shoes that fit, but are not very good looking. That's also a problem. So you want to be right there. You want to be bullseye on the money. How to measure feet for bespoke shoemakers is something that you're going to also pay attention to, and we're going to look at in the course of the class. Then we'll look at last taping. We're not going to demonstrate last taping in this class. You can see the videos that are in the playlist that are already recommended for how to tape up a last. There are several videos on the internet that discuss how to tape up a last, and I really don't find that there's any need to belabor the point. Then we'll look at locating the cardinal points on the shoe last, which is really what I want to do in this class. So we'll look at, locating things like the balls, how to locate things like the balls. Okay, yeah, how to locate things like the ball of a last, the vamp line on your last, the vamp point, the instep, the counterpoint, and the back height. So those are the cardinal points that we will look at in the course of this class and all whatnot. And then we will talk about the mean form and what you need to pay attention to. So this is a general idea, and I hope this slide is very clear. If it is not clear, let me know. So this is generally the human foot. This is, and from back to front is the length of the foot. Now, in many shoemaking books, you hear them talk about standard last lengths. Now, those standards are averages that shoemakers have observed over a long period of time. Oh, someone says the slides are blurry. Okay, in any case, I'm going to share these slides in the WhatsApp group. So whatever the case, you would have this slide. So not to worry. If they are blurry, I guess it's your network. I can see them very clearly on my own end. But if they are blurry, not to worry. I'll PDF the slides and also share it in the group. So when you get the human feet, so being that it's blurry, let me just go to this slide. When you get a customer and you want to measure feet, you want to measure their feet so that it will fit. Sorry about that. You want to measure the feet of your customer so that you can make footwear that fits him. You have to take the length of their feet from back to front. If you can see my cursor, you see where I'm pointing. So you measure the outline, you draw an outline of their feet, but especially having them wear the kind of socks that they will wear when they are wearing that shoe. If they are not going to be using any socks, then you can do away with that idea. The point is you measure an outline of their foot, then you measure the width from the widest points on their feet. Let's assume, for instance, let me zoom myself, for instance. Let me remove this slide. So let's assume that you have this last, right? You notice that these 2 points here, this point from here on the outside to here on the inside, they are the widest points on this last. If you can see that, just let me know. So these are the widest points on the last. Now, if you take a measurement, so on your customer's feet, you should also take a measurement that goes from this point to that point. But not only take the measurement that goes from this point to that point, measure the entire circumference as well. Because while you are taking the width to correspond with the last that you are going to measure the shoe, there's also volume of the feet. If the volume of your customer's feet doesn't match the last that you're using, then you have a problem where his legs can't go into the shoe. So you take the distance from here to here, and then you also take the entire circumference, like that. That way you have those two, and when you are measuring the last, you take a last that corresponds to that part. Now, let's go back to our slides. So, I guess this point about measuring the feet, since the slides are blurry, I'll leave it now. When we get to the WhatsApp group, I will use the PDF in explaining about measuring feet in the WhatsApp group. Somebody is asking link to the WhatsApp group. It's actually a paid class, Caleb. If you're not in the WhatsApp group, maybe you've not registered for this class and you are here, um, is dropping, but that's okay. We'll allow you to stay for the class. But just know that immediately after this live stream ends, you will not be able to access this video again. This video will only be accessible to people who paid for the class. So back to what I was saying. So the length of the feet. So when you're measuring also, you take a measurement of the length of the feet of your customer from front to back, and then from underneath the smallest toe to underneath the biggest toe. That will give you the widest point. So the distance from underneath the widest toe to underneath, just under the biggest toe, that's the widest point of the feet, and those points are actually called the balls. So there is the balls on the inside and the balls on the outside. The outside part is usually called the lateral side, and the inside part is called the medial side. Many of you have heard me talk about this over and over again, so I will not just belabor the point, and we will move along. So this is an illustration of how you measure the circumference of the balls. So underneath the smallest toe on the outside, underneath the biggest toe on the inside, and you take a measurement around those places. Then you should also take a measurement of what is called the instep girth. The instep is the highest point on your feet, the highest point you can see here. So you take a measurement around that instep, especially if you are going to be making boots. What we are making in this class is something like a derby, a monk strap. So you really may not have a problem with your instep, being that you can open it, you can relax, and you can tighten the buckles around it if you have any issues with your instep. But for it to fit and need no adjustments, you take a measurement of that, and then when you're working on the last, you ensure that the instep of your client or your customer corresponds with the instep on the last, or that the one on the last is slightly about 2 or 3 mm larger than what the measurements you took on your customer, and that will just serve you very well. But let's skip along and go to the points where I want to major on, and that's this thing that I call the rule of quarters. What do I mean by the rule of quarters? If you take a look at this beautiful pair of derbies that you find on this screen, I didn't make this shoe, but I think this is a very good example of a well-made shoe. The simple idea I use in illustrating the rule of quarters is that the distance between the tip here and the end of the toe cap is about 1/4 of the entire length of this shoe. So such that if you divided this shoe into 4, this will be 1/4 of that length. And the distance from here to there is also about 1/4 of the length of the shoe. If you look at the sides here also, the distance between here, where the facing stops, and where the curve of the quarter stops, is also just about 1/4 of the length. And then the entire distance from here, where the facing starts, and where it ends on the other side, this entire distance here is about 1/4 of the length of the entire shoe. So you notice that when you keep everything within 1/4 of the length of the entire shoe, everything looks proportional. Nothing looks too big or too small. Imagine that the toe cap of this shoe started somewhere here. When you see it, it will look off. Or imagine that it started somewhere at the back there. When you look, it will look off. It will look too big or too small. So my idea of the rule of quarters is that as long as you keep things within 1/4 of the last length, everything will look proportional. Most things, let me not say everything, most things will look proportional, and most things will look excellent. If you're following up to this point, let me know in the comment section. So that's the point I'm making, that as long as you are keeping things within 1/4 of the last length, everything will look proportional. So that rule really is that everything lying along the length. So if you see the torso, this shoe by the right here, everything that lies along the length is about 1/4. So from the back here up to there is about 1/4. From the tip here up to there is about 1/4. And then from here up to there, so to speak, is about 1/4. And then again, it also now means that everything lying across, so the things that lie along from back to front, things that go from back to front, 1/4 of the last length. But things that go from up to down or across the last length. So let me remove this. Let me remove the slide and just zoom in on myself. So let's say this is your last. The things that go from back to front, should be about 1/4. The things that go from across the last like this. So let's say this is the last. The things that go across like this, they would also be 1/4, but that means they have crossed from the left side to the right side, or they have crossed from the inside to the outside. So for you to maintain them at 1/4, it means that one half of it will be 1/8, the other side will be 1/8. So that when you add them up, it will ultimately come to 1/4. So that's what I mean by the rule of quarters. By the time we start designing the various parts of our, those of you who probably have seen the video of how to design the pattern pieces of the monk strap shoe already, are now beginning to get a sense of what I'm talking about. So those things that lie from back to front or from front to back, 1/4 of the last length. The things that lie from side to side, from inside to outside, or from outside to inside, 1/8 of the last length. Ultimately, because they go across, when you add 1/8 plus 1/8, it will give you 1/4. So if everybody say they are following on the chat group, so that's very, very good. It means that the monies that your parents paid for your math classes when you were in secondary school and primary school were very well utilized. Kudos to you. So let's bring our slides back on stage. So I think I've been able to explain what I mean by this rule of quarters. So by the time we are designing the pattern pieces, you will now begin to get a sense of why, when I'm measuring some things, I'm using certain measurements. And when I'm measuring other things, I'm using certain measurements, as the case may be. So let's move along. This is not very relevant, but the point here is the different parts of a shoe last. There's this part called, but you see this clearly. This is not very, very clear on this slide, but you see it clearly on the next slide, which is, okay, so let me speak a little bit about this last. So when you get a last, what's the first thing you're supposed to do? Some people will just tape one side of the last and sketch on that one side, and use the sketch that they have on that one side to design everything that they want to design. Is that wrong? No. There are actually very well, very, very advanced shoemakers who do that, and they get away with it. They get it right. So I'm not saying that that is a wrong approach. But then, if being accurate and being, if when you're starting and you want to keep yourself away from mistakes, my suggestion is that if you take a look at this last, for instance, so let me move a little bit back so that you can see this last properly. When you take a look at this last, you can immediately see that this side, the proportion on this side, is not exactly the same with the proportion on that side. But if you were going to design and you just tape up this one side and you design everything you did on this one side, by the time you duplicate the designs you have on this side and put it this side, you are immediately, nobody should tell you that immediately you are introducing some errors. Of course, those errors, you may be able to get away with them if the leather you are using is a stretchy leather, such that you can pull it and pull it into shape and conform it to what you want it to conform to. So that's fine. However, if you have troublesome leather, and then last like this are actually easy last to work with because the center line is almost flat. The graduation in the elevation of the angle here is very, the slope is not very intense. There are especially boot last that just come, or high heel last, they come and they shoot up. So you have very steep curves. When you have such last, if you design on just the outside, by the time you want to last, you have difficulties. Which is the reason why when I have my last, I'll put back that thing on the set. So when I have my last, what I typically do to at least minimize the errors. Am I saying that when you create a min form, you will not have errors? Certainly not. You will have errors, but your errors will be reduced because what you have done is you have taken this side, you've taken the proportions on this side, and you have related them to the proportions on this side. You have found the average so that in places where this one is excess, you remove small so that you can accommodate this one that is small. And then in places where this one is long and big, you remove small on this side so that you can accommodate this side that is smaller. That way you have an average that gives you a much more realistic idea of what this last is. So that average is what is known as the min form. So like you can see on this last, I have taped up the entire last, and then I'll cut it in the middle and then use, so when you cut it in the middle and separate the two of them, each of those two things are known as last copies. So it is the average of your last copies that is called your min form. I'll show you how to place your last copies so that you can get your min form. Meanwhile, if any of the things that I'm explaining now still sound confusing, at the end of the class, I'll show you a video where this thing has been demonstrated. And if you watch it, I'm very sure that that will explain any inquiries that you may have. So, right, so this is the stuff I talked about, min forms. So you take, when you cut out the last copies into two, this one here, you put the tip of both of them together, and then the tip of the back of both of them together. So the point is you trace the inside one first, and then you put the tip of the, sorry about that, I think my laptop is decharging. Let me just plug back the charging cable. Right, we are good to go. So you put the tip somewhere around here, the tip of the inside and outside parts, and then the back here. You align the two of them together, trace it out, and then find the middle where the two of them intersect. It is at that middle that you cut. So when you cut out along that middle, cut out along the back, and then underneath here, I typically don't bother about finding the middle between the two underneath here, because in any case, anything that falls underneath is going under the shoe. If you have more leather under the shoe, that's good for you. It simply means that the shoe will have a harder time pulling out of the sole than would be the case if it wasn't so. So the more leather you have underneath the shoe, the better for you. Of course, if you are economizing leather, you would want to take note of that. But then I simply just take the longer of the two lines. So if this was my min form, I'll take the blue line, the longer of them, and that will be my min form. So I think that's enough said about min forms. Whoa. There are a few other slides that I want to share with you. Just give me a minute and I will be back. So the point I'm making is that when you calculate your min forms, the next thing to do is now to take the cardinal point on the last. I actually thought that this was the particular slide I was looking for. Give me 2 minutes, guys. Let me load up another slide that accurately illustrates what I'm talking about. So just stay on the line, guys. I would only take a few minutes. All right, so my slides are almost up. There we are. Good. Excellent. I'm just giving it time to buffer a little bit and we'll be right. So good. So we've seen all of these parts. Let's just skip to good. So this is the part that I wanted to talk to you about right here. So now when you take up your last, this line here at the center is called the, so you of course draw a line running from the tip here, from the top here to the tip there, and then at the back from the top of the back to the bottom of the back, just eyeballing the center and drawing that line to demarcate the last into two equal parts, so to speak, and then the back also into two equal parts, so to speak. So this line that does that demarcation is called the center line. Now, you remember when we talked about the balls? The balls are the widest point. So if you lie this last, for instance, you take the last and you take the last and you lie it on a flat surface, the point where this widest point touches the ground, you mark that point. The point where it touches the ground on the other side, you also mark that point. Then you take your tape rule, and join those 2 points. That line, so those points are called the balls. So there's the ball on this side and there's the ball on the outer side. The line that joins the two of them is known as the vamp line. This is the vamp line. Then the point where they intersect with the center line is called your vamp point. Now, you remember that we said, so if we are applying the rule of quarters that we just talked about in about 2 or 3 slides ago, we said that things that run from back to front or from front to back are measured as 1/4 of the last length. So there's another point on top of this center line called the instep. And since it is running from front to back, we'll simply just measure it from the vamp point as 1/4 of the last length. So let's say the last length of this last was 35, for instance. Or, okay, let's use something that can divide easily. 24. Let's say the last length of this last was 24. The last length of this last is obviously not 24, but let's say it is 24. 24 divided by 4 will be 6. That means the instep will be the vamp point. From the vamp point, you measure 6 cm on this line to get the instep. Right. Then if we were trying to make a toe cap shoe, for instance, and we wanted to measure the distance from the tip here, the distance of the toe cap, we'll simply also measure 1/4 of the last length. 1/4 of 24 is 6. So from the tip right here on this line this way will give us 6, and we'll measure 6 here and we'll draw our toe cap. That's the rule of quarters in play. However, if we wanted to do the width of the facing, we want it to be 1/4 of the last length. When you add up the whole thing, we see that it runs from side to side, which means that simply take 1/8 of our last length, which is of course 1/4 divided by 2. So that if you measure from here going this way, you draw 1/8. 1/8 of 24 will be 3. So if we draw a line going down this way, we just mark 3 cm here. So that by the time we draw a line going this way, 3 cm, and another line going that way, 3 cm, ultimately to give us 6, which is 1/4 of the last length. So when you hear me Somebody said, is there a specific last used for this project? There is no specific last. Use the last that you have. The important thing, the reason I like people to use the last that they own is so that you can test out this rule of quarters that I'm talking about. So that when you test it out on your own last, wherever you buy the last, wherever you get the last, when you test it out on your own last, and you see that the rule remains consistent. You know, a rule is not a rule if it will change depending on the circumstances. So if it only works on the lasts that me I own, or the last that I commission them to make for me, then that's a problem. It wouldn't be a rule that should apply to you. But if you use your own last that you bought at your own market, and you apply the rule and it works for you, and somebody else in Canada takes his own last and applies the same rule and it works for him, then we can begin to say that, oh yeah, it is truly a rule. So there are no specific lasts that you should use as long as you are using you're applying the rule. Of course, don't go and use a boot last because we are not making a boot. Am I saying that if you use a boot last, it won't work? It will certainly work. The rule of quarters, in fact, this particular last that you are seeing in this picture is a boot last. So the rule of quarters will work in a boot last, but should you be using a boot last to make a monk strap shoe? Unless you want to make monk strap boots, then of course you can use a boot last. So, but for any other last, any other shoe last will work out fine, no matter the size and no matter the design. So let me get back to the point that I was making. So, and then this line that runs from the ball, from the inside ball to the outside ball, is now what we call the vamp line. I guess that is very well taken. So let's move to this point. So I've talked about the rule of quarters. There is only one variation. There is only one measurement that I do that is not either 1/4 of the last length or 1/8 of the last length, or a multiple or a factor of those two things. And that is the counterpoint. The counterpoint is, let me remove this. So, and that's the counterpoint, like I said. The counterpoint is at the back of the last, like this. In fact, on some of your lasts, you find that the manufacturer of the last has marked, if you check some of your lasts, especially lasts that come from Europe, this is an Asian last. This is one of those lasts that come from China. But if you get those ones that come from Europe, you notice that they have marked a point somewhere at the back there. I challenge you, get to your last library, pick up any last and see if it has a mark already marked at the back there. When you take that and find that mark, take a measurement of that mark and then take a measurement of the entire last, like this. So if you wanted to take a measurement of the last, you start somewhere around the middle of the back, somewhere at the center of the middle of the back, like this, and then measure this way and that way up to the tip right here. When you take this measurement, divide it by 5, you would see that it corresponds to 1/5 of that measurement that they would have marked at the back of your last. If they didn't mark your own last, not to worry. The formula is that the measurement of your counterpoint is 1/5 of your last length. Measurement of, so you might want to take that down. 1/5, 1/5 of your last length will give you your counterpoint, and you measure your counterpoint from beneath, from the bottom of the center line here, going upwards on the back center line. So that's it. Let me bring back my slide. So on this, so you see that I said that the counterpoint is last length, okay, not divided by 50, is actually last length divided by 5. I wanted to type bracket. I wanted to close the bracket, and I mistakenly typed 0. If you check on your laptop, you find that the same key that corresponds with closing of your bracket also corresponds with 0. So that's the mistake there. So it's not the last length divided by 50. is the last length divided by 5. Capish? Excellent. Then the back height is, if you add 1 cm, sometimes you add 1 cm, sometimes you add 0.5 cm, depending on your taste. But anything from 0.5 cm to 1 cm will be okay. So between 1 cm and 0.5 cm from your counterpoint should give you your back height. Some people actually use their counterpoints as their back height. That's also good, but I typically like to just raise it up a bit so that when the person is wearing the shoe, it can grip the back of the Achilles of the customer when he's wearing the shoe, and you are not at risk in any way howsoever that the shoe will be sliding up and down on his feet. In boots, you don't have that problem because a boot would immediately climb above the ankle of the customer. So, but in boots, there's what they call the heel slip. So if you notice the heel slip, it is because many of the measurements that are measured on boots are referenced from the counterpoint. So if there is heel slippage in a boot, imagine what would happen in a shoe, at least when the heel is slipping in the going up and down. It's actually a very comfortable phenomenon if you are wearing boots, so that your leg has space to breathe. But if it is a shoe and it is already slipping out of the shoe, then it can be uncomfortable, and the person will be trying to use his toes to grip himself in the shoe while he's walking. So you want shoes that are very, very comfortable for your customer without any problem, which is why I like to add between 0.5 cm and 1 cm to the counterpoint to give me my back height. Then there is a line that runs from the counterpoint to the middle of the vamp line, somewhere here. That line is called the quarter line. A lot of other things that we are going to discuss on constructing the different parts of your, whether it's a monk strap shoe or a derby or an Oxford or even a boot, would also be referenced from that quarter line. So, but these points that we have talked about and the lines that we've talked about are the cardinal points on the shoe last that will be the reference for many of the things that you will be designing on your pattern. And what are those points and lines that we talked about? Let's go back to the former slide. We talked about the balls on the outside and the inside. We talked about the center line running from up to the tip like that, and then from up downwards like that at the back. So there's a center line in front and a center line at the back. Then we talked about the vamp point, which is the intersection point between the vamp line. So the vamp line is the line that runs from the inside ball to the outside ball. And the intersection point it has with the center line in front is known as the vamp point. So those are the cardinal points and lines that we talked about, in addition to these ones, which is what? The counterpoint. The counterpoint is on the back center line, and it runs from downwards going up, and we said it is 1/5 of the last length. And then if you add between 0.5 cm and 1 cm to that counterpoint, you'd get your back height. So those are the cardinal points on any last, whether they are for men or for women, whether they are for boots or they are for shoes, whether they are for sneakers or they are for sandals, whether they are high heels or they are flats. These rules remain consistent. So on any last, you are going to have to calculate all of those. You are going to have to find all of those cardinal points and generate those cardinal lines. When you have done that, you create your mean form, and then with your mean form, you can now start designing your patterns. In tomorrow's live class, we will talk about designing the various parts of the pattern of a monk strap shoe. But the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the cardinal points on your shoe last, and then how to create your mean form, and then we will work with the mean form in tomorrow's class. All right. So we've been here for 40 minutes, and I think this is a good place to call it a day, but we will not call it a day until I check to see if there are any questions that you may have. So if you have any questions, please shoot right now in the chat box, and I'll be grateful. I'll be happy to take those questions. I see that we were at the highest point, we were 11 people on the live stream, 10 or about 11 people, but right now we are down to 7 people. So that's a good way to be. If you have any questions, let me know. Somebody said, okay, it's all on my last. Okay, yeah, if you've noticed those points on your last, excellent. Tony Odhambo is from Kenya. Nice to see you here. You're always a regular on the channel. We're very happy to always have you. I'm trying to work on how people outside Nigeria can actually make payments. I have PayPal, but I noticed that many people don't like to use PayPal. I don't know why, really. But I'm working with Paystack to see that we can sort out international payments for people outside Nigeria. And I guarantee you that on our next class, we'll be able to take international payments. So not to worry. We are working on that very, very well. And then I'd like to take a visit to Kenya if you will invite me. So if you want to invite me, just let me know. Any questions? Any questions? If there are no questions, we have just about 2 minutes to take questions. If there are not, we'll just begin to round up. Those of you who are in the paid WhatsApp class, this video will be available for you to see for the entire duration of the class. And then thereafter, it would only be available to members of the channel. So if you're not a member of the channel, this is to invite you to become a member. I think it costs about just $1 every month to be a member. If you can afford it, do consider being a member. Abubakar Buka said that he enjoyed listening to the lecture. Thank you very much. I'm happy that you found it very enriching. Thank you. Caleb said this is good. Thank you very much, Caleb. You're also a very regular person on the channel. Nice to know that you have our back. Thank you very much. So I think we can begin to round up. If you have any questions that we were not able to take in this live session, you can always put them in the WhatsApp chat. So until I see you guys, we have another live class by 10 p.m. in the evening. So I hope to see you guys in that live class. But until then, God bless you. Peace. And keep making shoes. And meanwhile, if you, during the duration of this class, anyone who is able to finish his own pair of monk strap shoes, and you live in Lagos, or you can afford to come to Lagos, if you don't live in Lagos, me and you will be on set to make a pair of shoes that we will video together. It doesn't matter how nice or how well your shoe is made. The only criteria is that you start your shoes and you finish it during the duration of these classes. I owe you something. So this is to encourage you to get on with your work, and let's make magic. God bless you. See you in the next class. Peace.